Twenty-four minutes on to 11 o'clock here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. You're locked on to WEFM 99.9, the clean fresh sound, and this is your It's Your Turn program. Remember, It's Your Turn is an interactive program, so the numbers to call are 457 9997 if you're calling from a local landline, 532 9997 if you're calling from a digital cell phone, or you can call us or send us a message on WhatsApp at 457 9997. The It's Your Turn program is being hosted by Mr. Cecil Ryan and Mr. Philbert John. Good morning to you, Cecil.
Good morning to you, Karen, and good morning to all our listeners. Of course, we're talking about the community of It's Your Turn listeners and, of course, WEFM listeners. And as you know, It's Your Turn, in fact, all of WEFM is a family affair, according to Sly and the Family Stone. So we are happy to be with you in family conversation today. And we have a very special program for you today, which would be, you're going to be hearing from one of our compatriots. Later on, I'll introduce him, but right now, let me turn over to Pijan to introduce himself. Pijan.
Thank you, Cecil, and good morning. Good morning to all of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and to all persons listening to WEFM wherever you are. It's good to be back as we engage in another edition of It's Your Turn. And as usual, we attempt to be educational, informative, and uplifting in our engagement with you on a weekly basis. We don't have Joel this morning, but we wish him well wherever he is, whatever he's doing. Cecil?
Yes, of course. I'm glad you mentioned that Joel is absent this morning. I noticed that he has indicated that he'd be following the program. He's as usual. I'm sure he's following the program. He will be following the program this morning, and as a matter of fact, he has expressed delight in being able to listen to our special guest this morning. I'll introduce him in a while. But, Pijan, as you know, last week we had a very good conversation led by the Ambassador Perez Santana of Venezuela and Dr. Richard Cox. And I want to just give a shout out to Dr. Cox if he's listening. I believe he might be listening because I share with him the promo. And knowing Dr. Cox, I'm sure he might find a moment to share the program, his views on the program this morning. Also want to give a shout out to Ambassador Perez. And I hope he's in touch with his compatriots in Venezuela and that they are doing fine. Yes, Pijan, so we had a good discussion and we want to continue that discussion today, this morning. And that is why, having seen a piece in One St. Vincent News written by Dr. Emmanuel Croshy, I decided to reach out to him and invited him to be with us this morning. He has gladly and willingly agreed to do so. So we'll be introduce him in a while officially. But right now, I just want to get something off my chest, Pijan. I don't know if you may not have seen it, but I saw on Facebook a disgusting kind of, rumbling by a guy who is stalwart, if I may use that word, of the New Democratic Party. And he took pleasure in trying to rebuke the Honorable Philip Jackson, Minister of Education, on a matter. And I don't want to get into the details of the matter, but he referred to Minister Jackson as a boy. And that just rings something wrong in my mind, knowing the history of the use of that word against our people of African descent, particularly in the USA, and even here in the Caribbean. And him, in his disgust and his anger, referring to the Honorable Philip Jackson as boy. Boy, don't do that, and boy, watch it, something like that. And I was so incensed with that reference, because as you know, Peter, and as I keep saying, our history is one full of struggles against such references in particular, and against those who enslaved and continue to oppress our people. And there he is, joining in his anger or a displeasure, referring to Minister Jackson as boy. No, Minister Jackson's we may not share the same philosophical outlook or political allegiance, but he's a human being, a decent human being from good stock, and who has been working to enlighten our people. As a reference coming from this gentleman, I mean, Minister Jackson is not in his intellectual or academic class. He's not, let me put it different, he's not in Minister Jackson's academic I mean, they're in two different lanes, and he should remain in his lane and respect those that people voted to serve the country. You know, so I just wanted to say that, because when I saw it and heard it, I was so incensed and angry. He was clearly being disrespectful of Minister Jackson as a person and as a minister. And that is the problem I have with some people who, because they feel that there has been a culture of ignorance and arrogance cultivated in St. Vincent and the Grenadines over the last few years, disrespect and contempt and so on. They feel free in operating in that context. But we who are better enlightened we must join together to denounce and reject that kind of tendency. Minister Jackson was elected and he was appointed as Minister of Education, and he should be respected as such. And I dare anyone who would try to belittle the person of any respectable person in office. So I just wanted to say that, get it off my chest this morning. Pijan.
Cecil, I haven't seen the clip that you're speaking about, but I note in a general sense the tendency to disrespect your opponent, a person who share a different view. It is one thing to say I disagree with you respectfully. It's another thing to say I disrespect you, but you are so and so and so and so. Carrying out using names and so on. So I'm glad you bring it to the fore today, and let us attempt to demonstrate respect for each other across the board, no matter what our different positions might be. Cecil, you could just permit me, I don't think we have had an opportunity to congratulate the new Governor General from the standpoint of this program. So I just want to use the opportunity to congratulate Stanley K. John Casey. And just in case people are wondering what the Casey is about, it's referred to the King's Council. I think members of the Privy Council referred to by the King or Queen. It used to be QC, now it is KC. So I'll just use the opportunity on behalf of the program to congratulate him. He's an outstanding Vincentian who contributed much to the socio-political life of the country. And I in from my standpoint, I think was a good choice. Um, he has had his rough and tumble days in politics, and he is an outstanding barrister. And we want to again congratulate him on his being selected as the Governor General of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Pigeon, I noticed that Renwick, or colleague Renwick, had done an article making reference and in the same way congratulating him. So I read that article and I thought a very useful article done by Renwick, and I endorse it as well. Yeah, all right. All right. So our main topic for today is continuing our discussion on the kidnapping, on the attack and kidnapping of President of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife by the forces from the United States of America, and the implications that that action and related issues will have on our Caribbean, and in particular St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I read an article piece by Dr. Emmanuel Kwashi, and I'll come back to say who he is, in One St. Vincent News, and I reached out to Damien, who was kind enough to give me his contact, because I was very impressed with the analysis which Dr. Kwashi shared with us in One St. Vincent News. And for people who are wondering, Dr. Kwashi, his name is Emmanuel Kwashi. He's a lecturer. He's a lecturer at of international relations at the University of the West Indies, Mona campus, and a UK Commonwealth scholar who holds a PhD in politics from the School of History, Anthropology, Philosophy, and Politics at Queen's University, Belfast. He's also an author of academic books and peer-reviewed journal articles in the areas of terrorism studies and U.S. foreign policy towards Latin America and the Caribbean. So we are very pleased to have with us this morning, Pigeon, Dr. Emmanuel Kwashi, who is, as I said, based in Jamaica. So we are going to be listening to him via video link. So Dr. Kwashi, I believe you're hearing me.
Morning,
Good morning to you. Good morning.
Cecil, and morning everyone else. Philip, Philbert, John.
Yes, yes.
Yes. So I'm hearing each and everyone clearly on my end. Yes.
Okay. And I just want to inform our listeners, our community of listeners, that we are listening to the voice of another Vinci based who is lecturing at Mona in Jamaica. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Yeah. Usually, Pijan would know every Vinci and where they went to school and so on. But I don't know. I don't think he knows you this much.
No. Not at all.
We are very happy to have you on this morning, Dr. Kwashi. And I hope you're doing well. We hope you're doing well. And I know you only have about an hour to spend with us, but we appreciate whatever time you have to do with us. We can always arrange for a subsequent occasion, but we're happy to have you on.
Yes.
I don't know if you wish to make any opening remarks.
Well, I just wanted to say that I am happy and honored, actually, that you have invited me to also talk a little bit about the U.S. and Venezuela issue. It is an honor to be among such erudite scholars like yourselves. I also want to give a shout out to my friend Damien Mark for making the connection. I just want to also say as well, one of the reasons why I tend to stay away from the radio and I tend to more write in the articles, it is because I get a bit nervous. And when I do, it sort of brings out my stutter as well, because I also have a stutter, but I've gotten better at it and overcome it a bit. Overcome it quite a lot. But sometimes when I engage in certain spaces, like radio, it tend to come out a little bit here and there. And I wanted to say that because I will be speaking a little bit slow as well.
Of course.
So that way I can articulate my points as clear as possible for both you and the audience to understand. When I'm in the lecture room, in the classroom, it is different because I'm free. I can walk around. I can move my hands. So it is a bit more liberating environment as opposed to the radio. But I will just start off by saying that the U.S.
But by the way, Dr. Kwashi, can
sorry.
you, sorry to interrupt you, but for the benefit of our listeners, give us a sense of where in St. Vincent you're from. And your early experience here in St. Vincent.
Yes, so I am originally from Beckway. Woohoo!
Okay.
The Beckway.
Okay.
So I am originally a Beckway man.
Okay.
But I grew up, my younger years, I grew up in New Montrose. That will be mainland. And I grew up there with an adopted mom. She had, I would say, unofficially adopted me. At that time, her name was Margaret Berkeley, but she passed away a few years ago. So I was adopted by her, and also her 3 daughters as well, who I also call my sisters. My mom is Joanne Kwashi. I want to give a shout out to her. She is currently a resident at the mental home. She was mentally ill from when I was born, and that's why I was adopted also and lived in New Montrose for a time. I have a sister with my mom, and her name is Avadel Kwashi, so I want to give a shout out to her as well. But that is my biological sister that I have with my mom.
Yes.
I also spent a few years at the Liberty Lodge Boys Home. I think everybody is aware of the Liberty Lodge Boys Institution. Yes. So I grew up there as well for a few years before moving back to Beckway, and I spent my high school years in Beckway. And then after that, I spent my college years, my second year in college, I would say. I spent it in Cane Garden, and I stayed with Miss Crichton, who I also call my mom as well. I have many moms. She also, I spent a couple of years or so with her. So I also see her as my mom as well, and also her kids as well as also my sibling. And also I have another mom, which is Heidi Duncan, who I also call mom as well. The point of all of this is to show that even though I did not grow up in a fully and consistent, stable home, I still give credit to a lot of persons who played an important role in my life, particularly my adopted moms, my unofficial moms, my aunties as well in Beckway, and my cousins in Beckway, who also helped me out a lot my grandmother, who played a very important role in my life in Beckway, but she also passed away a few years ago. So I just want to give a shout out to my aunties as well in Beckway, because they had played a role during my high school years as well. And many of the other persons who played a role in my life. But even though I struggled throughout those times, I never gave up at all. And I must definitely give a shout out also to the Honorable Dr. Ralph Gonzalez. He also played an important role in my life as well. As a mentor, he guided me, and in many ways, he supported me as well. When I applied for the disadvantaged student loan, at the time I got accepted into UE, and I said to them, which is the Prime Minister, and also the other persons who were sitting there at the time, approving the loan. I am sorry, I cannot remember all of the names right now.
That's all right. That's all right.
They know who they are. So
Of
they had
course.
said to me that I must go out there, which is UE, and I must do well and make the boys at Liberty Lodge proud, make my mom in mental home proud, and go out there and get an honors. And I said to them, I'm going to get a first class honors. And I did just that. I graduated with
Right.
first class honors, and I was also nominated valedictorian for my graduating year. But I didn't speak. Somebody else spoke. I was kind of shy. I didn't want to speak because I didn't want to go up and stutter through the entire speech as well. I still have to overcome that fear,
Yes.
and so on. And then after, I went on to do a master's because I did so well. UE, to the Department of Government, had offered me a full tuition scholarship. And they had offered me what is called the Graduate Assistance Program as well, allowing me to work. So I became a tutor and also a researcher to make extra money to pay for sorting stuff. And also, I had also received a small grant as well from the government at that time to supplement the scholarship that I got from UE. And after I graduated with distinction, which is the highest at the master's, I went on to apply for the UK Commonwealth Scholarship. I didn't show if I would get it because it's a highly competitive scholarship, which I think roughly around over or more 100,000 persons across the Commonwealth apply for this scholarship. And I was one of the very few handful of persons, particularly for the PhD, because it is two. They give you for the master's and they give you for the PhD. But the PhD is only about 20 to 30%, while the master's is the larger percentage. And when I got the PhD, I couldn't believe it at all. And I said to myself, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to go to the UK, and I'm going to do exceptionally well. And I did just that. I finished my PhD in 3 years, also with the highest grade, which is that I finished without any corrections at all. And after finishing my PhD, I came back home and I worked as a researcher. But I always wanted to be a lecturer, hence the reason why I am at UE Mona as a lecturer of international relations in the Department of Government. I published my first academic book in 2023 after I became a lecturer in 2022. And that book is on terrorism and the Caribbean. But it also introduces a new way of how we think and understand and also interpret terrorism. It was published by Palgrave Macmillan. Then my articles I published in US foreign policy, and that was in Latin American policy. And I also published one also on terrorism again, in perspective on terrorism. My most recent book and latest book was published last year in 2025 with Routledge. And that one specifically looks at US war on terror in a global sense, and then specifically within the region. And I am currently working on another book, but I don't want to give too much details on
Okay.
that one because that one is currently in the works. But that one specifically is going to look at small states' foreign policy, and it's going to look
Okay.
at Eastern Caribbean states. So that is the new project that I'm currently working on, and I'm looking to have that finalized either by the end of this year or probably next year. I am not rushing it too much because I want to take my time to really do this book the same level of justice I did the previous two books. So that is pretty much about me in terms of my personal life, but also my professional / academic life as well.
All right. Dr. Kwashi, we're very pleased. We're very special. We feel very special and very blessed to have you on Isiatan this morning. We respect and we admire your journey, and we wish to say to you, on behalf of our community of listeners, that we look forward to your further progress and development and your contribution to life generally, but especially to knowledge in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We really appreciate what you've said to us this morning. Peter?
Yes, I just want
Thank
to
you.
endorse your comments, and I too admire the journey and the accomplishments to date, and I wish you all the best.
Thank
And
you.
Dr. Kwashi, let me just say to you, people start commenting, because one person who said to you, good morning, gentlemen. Whoa, just listening to Dr. Kwashi fills my heart with pride and joy. So already you're making an impact on our program this
Thank
morning.
you.
We appreciate it.
I also wanted to, sorry, I didn't mean to interject, but I also
That's all right.
wanted to,
Just feel free to anytime.
okay, yes, I also wanted to give an appreciation to the former Minister of Finance, Camilo Gonsalves, and the current Prime Minister, Dr. Honor Reblo, Friday as well, because they had also recognized me in Parliament in 2022, if memory serves me right as well. They had also applauded me and recognized me in the House of Assembly. So I also wanted to give them my thanks as well and appreciation.
All right. So you've been a student of Latin America and the Caribbean, as you've indicated. You are actually, not have been, you are.
Yes.
And you've also been looking at the whole question of terrorism in whatever forms it comes.
Yes.
So we look forward to what you have to share with us this morning in that respect.
Yes.
In particular, as I was saying at the very beginning, we started a discussion last week on the kidnapping of President Nicolas Maduro
Yes.
and his wife. So we want to continue that and give our listeners a broadest perspective, not biased, but the broadest perspective as to how to understand what has happened and what is likely to happen to the Caribbean, maybe the world actually, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines in particular. So yes, as we all know that the U.S. Let me allow you really to remind us of the what happened.
Yes. All right. So let me start off by saying first, I appreciate the adjective that you use in terms of what took place. It was, in fact, a kidnapping. And that is important to highlight because what took place with respect to the illegal bombing, invasion, and abduction of a sitting president, one that was elected by the people of Venezuela, regardless of the noise and regardless of U.S. media sort of narrative. And I have written about U.S. media and its propaganda in my first book, particularly with respect to terrorism. But the same sort of framework applies in every situation with respect to U.S. foreign policy. And they have done the same thing with Venezuela as well. They painted Nicolas Maduro as a communist, authoritarian leader, but also a drug kingpin who is the head of a made-up group. The U.S. State Department recently released a statement that the group that they claim Nicolas Maduro was the head of, which is Cartel de los Soles. Sorry, my Spanish isn't too good, so I must apologize. That they said that he was the leader of. It turns out that the group was a made-up group. It wasn't real. And I needed to point this out because it's going to be the staple of my discussion. The reason is it's because it is a linchpin of U.S. propaganda in its foreign policy. They claim that they were going after the Venezuelan president because of drugs. It was an anti-drug trafficking war. But we all now know, and most of us knew before the information we reveal now, we knew before, which is why I wrote the article in One News months before when I stated clearly this was an operation for two main things: regime change and oil. And a third thing, actually, which I pointed out to, was also to hurt China as well. So this is where the global and the Caribbean meets, and particularly St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Donald Trump wanted a regime change, and he wanted to put somebody in power who is more likely to agree with U.S. foreign policy agenda, i.e., ensuring that the oil companies, corporation in the United States benefits, which is what they're doing right now. Donald Trump actually held a meeting with oil executives and heads of major oil corporations prior to the invasion. Since the invasion and illegal abduction, it has been about oil. Every statement has been about Venezuela's oil. And Donald Trump's fantasy about U.S. rights to Venezuela's oil, the ludicrousness of it, not just only the violation of international law. And I don't want to use international law in an abstract and vague sense, but I want to point to the specific laws so that people will understand what laws that the U.S. also violated as well. One, Article 2.4 of the United Nations Charter, which specifically places a broad ban on the use of force in international relations, and specifically refrain from violating the sovereignty and political independence of a sovereign nation state. And there are only two explicit exceptions to which a state can use force. One, self-defense or collective self-defense, and that is under Article 51. And two, collective security, which is approved by the UN Security Council under Articles 39 to 42, none of which applies within the US Venezuelan situation. And of course, there are the controversial exceptions to Article 2.4, which is not explicitly stated in the United Nations Charter. Hence, the reason why they are deemed controversial, because they are also open to being abused. And those ones are humanitarian intervention or intervention on humanitarian grounds. 2, intervention by invitation. This is when a state invites you to intervene in an internal conflict that they themselves are unable to quell. So they're calling for help. And 3, protection of nationals. This is when a state's citizen in another state, in a foreign state, life is under threat, in danger, and that state has to come in and protect their nationals. The latter 2 was used, and I know you guys are old enough and erudite enough, like, and historians yourself. So this one will ring a bell. The latter 2 controversial exceptions, that is, intervention by invitation and protection of nationals, was used in the 1983 invasion of Grenada. So we have had these episodic events right here in the Caribbean of recent times. And they have used those two, the United States had used those two same arguments to intervene in Grenada. But of course, the underlying agenda, or I should say the hidden one, was about preventing the spread of communism, because it was during the Cold War era. Similarly to Venezuela, if we go back a little bit, I'm sorry, I like to put in a little bit of history as well.
That's fine. That's proper for us.
Context. So if we go
proper.
back a little bit, we have seen that this is not a new phenomenon. What is happening to Nicolas Maduro, the illegal abduction and the sham trial in terms of the drug charges, or the potential drug check, to which, again, the Trump administration labeled, which is a fentanyl issue, a fentanyl crisis, which they said that Maduro is connected to. But nothing is in the indictment about that, about the fentanyl at all. So we see that it is nothing but a sham trial. But if we go back, we will notice that this is not a new phenomenon, but a continuation of U.S. foreign policy. In 1950s, they did the same with the Guatemalan president, Jacobo Arbenz, right? They also used the same sort of propaganda and military operation, etc. It was known as PB Success. That was the code name, Operation PB Success. So for those any of the audience who may want to do a deeper reading on it. And the reason why Jacobo Arbenz was a threat, it is because, one, he introduced a sweeping set of land reforms to give back many of the unused lands that were occupied by a United States cooperation. And he wanted to give it back to the peasant farmers. The company who was utilizing or had those unused lands was United Fruit Company. And they had concern and fears about losing those lands due to the land reforms. And under, I think it was Dwight Eisenhower, if my memory serves me right, President Dwight Eisenhower, I think, was the president at that time. Was 1950s, 1954, I think specifically, is when the operation did occur. Part of it was the Cold War. They labeled him as a communist and a communist threat. But it was really pushed by United Fruit company. It was about their bottom line. It was about their profits. I'm using that to draw a parallel between Okobo Benz and Nicholas Majuru. In the 1950s, the reason why they wanted to remove him, it wasn't because of some communist threat, because he wasn't a communist threat. That was part of the propaganda. They also said that he came to power in a rigged and fraudulent election. But there was no evidence that the election was fraudulent. He was democratically elected. But United Fruit Company went to Washington because they were concerned about their bottom line. It is the same thing that is happening now in Venezuela as well. They claim he came to power in a rigged election, he is an authoritarian leader, and all of this. But you notice now, since they remove him, what the discussion is about? Who? Not human rights, not democracy, not the people of Venezuela. No, it's about who? Exxon, Mobil, and all of these massive oil companies in the United States. It's about Venezuela's oil. But I also want to add in another theme. In addition to US oil companies making a profit, and it's about their bottom line, it's also about hurting China. And here's why. China was the largest importer of Venezuela oil, importing roughly 500,000 barrels per day. They were the lifeline to the Venezuelan economy in purchasing oil by bypassing US sweeping economic sanctions on Venezuela, which, when I listen to some of the media analysis, particularly in the United States, they conveniently omit US role in creating a lot of the economic issues in Venezuela because of the economic sanctions that they had put on Venezuela. That dates all the way back, I think, to 2014, if memory serves me right. However, Professor Jeffrey Sachs of Columbia University stated recently at the United Nations Security Council in his address to that body that the United States coverted actions in Venezuela actually dates all the way back to 2002. This is important because you cannot look at the issues in Venezuela without looking at the role that the United States have played for decades in disrupting Venezuela economy and also its political system as well by supporting opposition leaders. An opposition leader who actually recently won the Nobel Peace Prize, but who Donald Trump has since dismissed, stating that she does not have the respect or the support in Venezuela. So how can somebody who is so unpopular in Venezuela could have been the rightful person to have won? So where is the rigged election then? You see what I'm saying? So even their propaganda is falling apart, and which is why they're shifting the goalposts all the time. Now, Trump administration have told you clearly, Vice President J.D. Vance, in a recent interview, stated that we cannot have somebody like Maduro sitting on the world's largest oil reserves, while at the same time in bed or in partnership with our pair competitors. Who is that? Russia and China. But China, I believe, is their main focus as well. And this is where now it comes to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I know that the current government in recent years or previous elections, not the election recently, but the one before, China was an important part of their foreign policy. They had talked about making the switch. I think this was announced in 2015, if memory serves me right, for the first time. But they were mute on the China issue in the recent election. And I don't have any inside information from the government, but if I am to predict, I believe it also has to do with the current US foreign policy, which has a very anti China stance, which is why Donald Trump invoked his own Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine in his recent national security strategy released by the White House weeks before the illegal invasion of Venezuela. And part of Trump's strategy, national security strategy, and he made it clear, is that it is time for the United States to retake, or I should say, as he said, to be once again the dominant and sole power in the Americas of the Western Hemisphere. And they will not allow any external powers to intervene in the Americas. This song familiar to Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, which we all know was coined also as the big stick policy. Speak soft, but walk with a big stick, which meaning that you will use your words, but then you will use the military when necessary. And we are seeing that Trump is doing that. But the difference back then, when the Monroe Doctrine of 1823 was established, it was about European powers, keeping European powers out of the Americas. But now, Trump's Monroe Doctrine is about keeping communist threat, well, a perceived communist threat out of the Americas. But this is not new either, because it's already in the Caribbean Basin Initiative, which was initiated by Ronald Reagan in the 1980s. I wrote an article on that as well, which is why I urge in my article there needs to be a rethinking of the Caribbean Basin Initiative, which offered, of course, duty-free access to many Caribbean Basin countries, including St. Vincent and the Grenadines, duty-free access on a range of tangible goods to the US market. But part of it, the ideology behind it, was to ensure that there wouldn't be a spread of communism, as US like to call us, in its backyard. And Trump as well administration. Some of the officials have used such term and so forth in recent time. So the Venezuelan issue can be viewed within the context of US foreign policy historically towards Latin America and the Caribbean. But also it can be viewed within the context of international law, which I also spoke about before. And it is scary for small island developing states like St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who can only rely on the tools of international law that was created, the international legal framework that was created post-World War II. Because we do not have the hard power like the United States. So we have to rely on the principles of international law. But also there is economic issues and security issues for St. Vincent and many of the Caribbean countries as well. An important point that I noticed that tends to not get much light is the Petro-Caribbean Initiative. Many small island developing states within the Caribbean, Latin America, and I think Central America as well, has benefited tremendously from the Petro-Caribbean Initiative, St. Vincent and the Grenadines included. As a matter of fact, I remember St. Vincent and the Grenadines debt was forgiven by the Venezuelan government, I think in 2017. And they had pledged to forgive another 50%, I think, or so, which would have been approximately 4.2% of SVG GDP at the time. And they had forgiven that debt, I think, in 2022, which is approximately 189 million EC dollars as well, if memory serves me right. If my figures is a little bit off, please forgive me.
That's all right. You did very well, Dr. Koshi.
Right?
The details at which you're going is we really appreciate what you're doing.
Okay, so I wanted to highlight that St. Vincent had benefited tremendously, not only from the Petro-Caribbean Initiative, but also from the forgiveness of the debt that we owed to the Petro-Caribbean Initiative, thanks to the Venezuelan government of Nicolas Maduro. But there are many countries who still have, I believe, outstanding debt to the Petro-Caribbean. But the Petro-Caribbean Initiative was an initiative that benefited small island developing states, because we did not have to pay the full amount for the petroleum that we were receiving, the oil and so on, from Venezuela upfront. I think we had like a 25 years period, if memory served me right, to pay with a 1% interest. And in some cases, we did not have to pay in monetary value. We paid in goods and services and so on as well. So I am concerned about what will now happen to that Petro-Caribbean initiative, especially if the United States, as Trump says, that they are going to take control of Venezuela. And we all see what happens when the United States engages in regime change. We can look at Libya, we can look at Iraq, we can look at Afghanistan, even though the Taliban came back and took over Afghanistan, so that was a total fail as well. And we can look at Syria and so on, and many other cases as well. And we all see how it turns out. The state becomes a failed state, and then it creates a migration crisis. The Iraq war and the Syrian conflict to which America was involved created the EU migration crisis, which brings me to my other point. We also have to be concerned of a migration crisis with this Venezuelan issue as well on our hands, because regime change results in political instability, and it creates an environment of which you will have different fractions within the country, maybe warring with each other. And this then can have a spillover effect into other states, into other neighboring states as well. So that is also another issue that we have to also look at, that can be a concern for St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So not only just in terms of oil and gas prices and the Petro-Caribbean deal, but also a migration crisis, which will also come with a security crisis as well, because you will have certain characters who may also, in many ways now, will bypass certain regional security architectures that are set up or established to also detect and capture certain criminals, um, pursue drug traffickers, etc., and so on. And with the US abducting the president of Venezuela and creating this sort of political instability, can result in these sort of regional security concern. Luckily, it is stable for now with the vice president um, is the acting president at the moment. But Venezuelans in large numbers have since taken to the street and still are taken to the street to protest the illegal invasion and the kidnapping of their president, and is calling for the return of their president. And I am hoping that we might see a 2002 sort of play out. And when I say 2002, I am referring to the protests and the demand in Venezuela when the United States, I think, had temporarily deposed Hugo Chavez and held him. And the Venezuelan people took to the street and demand his return. And he was returned, I think, within 48 hours or a couple of days. They returned him and he was reinstalled as the president of Venezuela. So again, this is not the first time the United States tried this. But the difference, I believe, this time around is that Donald Trump is not President Bush. And Donald Trump is operating within a different sort of, I should say, global affairs. In 2002, there was still, to some extent, this sort of respect for international law. To some extent, and I say to some extent because we also had the illegal invasion of Iraq in 2003, the following year. But at the same time, the Bush administration, even though it was an illegal invasion, they still did this sort of dance at the United Nations, and they went to the Security Council, they debated it to get the approval, etc. And they tried to justify it under international law. And when that didn't work, they had to then move towards using weapons of mass destruction, which we all know that was a lie. But at the same time, they debated it as much as they can. They tried to also invoke the rule of exception in sort of like a Smithian perspective. Carl Smith was also a legal Jewish, or I should say a legal scholar during the German Reich. And he created the whole times of exception, the whole concept of it, and the friend enemy, which I also wrote about in my second book on the war on terror, and which is why I argued how the Bush administration, particularly Bush himself, had made the argument that he, as sovereign in times of exception, is ordained with the right to make decisions that best protects the United States security interests. We are seeing similar action with Donald Trump, not going to Congress to get congressional approval for war. Instead, he invoked the sort of exception as the sovereign that we are dealing with a crisis, a fentanyl crisis. It's out of control. It has created a space of exception, and therefore, as the sovereign, I have the right to act, and therefore I have act to deal with the issue that is causing a security problem for the United States, even though, of course, it was based on propaganda. The point is that is the sort of framework that has been used to justify their actions in Venezuela. And an action that started out with the bombing of innocent persons in boats, including in recent reports, some of which are fishermen as well. So all of this tells me that the Caribbean right now, Caribbean countries are now living through a regressive time. We are going backwards to the big stick policy as Trump has invoked his corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. And we have now seen it in action. And this is going to have serious consequences for Caribbean states, particularly St. Vincent and the Grenadines, not just in terms of an economic one, particularly when we look at issues such as Petrocaribe, the gas, the price of gas, and so on. And also when we look at issues such as trading, when we look at issues such as the migration crisis, the possible migration crisis, another possible regional security crisis, and as a matter of fact, the issue of drug trafficking, to which the Trump administration ostensibly wanted to combat and deal with, but never did. And also, we have to look at border issues and sorting criminals, particularly transnational criminal groups, and the possibility of transnational terrorist groups as well taking advantage of this crisis if, in fact, it gets out of control and turn into a Libya and Iraq or Syria issue. And I pray to God that it does not turn out to that sort of situation. But right now, as it is, it seemed to have stabilized a little bit. But I'm hoping that it does hold for the rest of times. So we are looking at some of those particular issues impacting Caribbean states and particularly St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And another very important point that I think will impact us is also our foreign policy, which is why I mentioned the current government policies before. I don't know again if they have changed or if the policy remain the same. So I am speaking on it in circumspect. That I know that they had an intention, but again, this was before. I don't know if they still have it. Again, I'm speaking in circumspect here, in terms of switching to China. But it looks as though, based on what I'm seeing, it looks as though they are not going to make the switch. But this is important to mention because, again, part of the Trump's policy is limiting China's influence in the region as much as possible. So now would not be the right time for any state to establish relations with China if you do not have relations with China. Now might not be the best time to do so. And me saying that, I shouldn't have to say that because, again, based on international law, each and every state have the sovereign right to engage in foreign policy with whomever they want to, whenever they want to. And they should not be coerced or be scared of engaging in foreign policy with any state because another state do not want you to. But I am just saying, as a practical approach in terms of foreign policy right now, based on the Venezuela-US situation, it might not be the most practical decision to establish relations with China right now. So I think that is another thing will impact Caribbean states, both in terms of those who might want to switch and both in terms of those who have relations with China as well. They might find themselves having to sort of soften it a little bit and probably roll back a little bit the deepening of relations that they have with China as well. And from a global standpoint as well, what this will do is that this will also, Trump's action in Venezuela will also encourage other superpowers like Russia and China as well to ignore international law. And I saw another analysis that looking at China possibly taking advantage of this to invade Taiwan sometime this year. I haven't looked into that much, so I'm not going to really touch too much on it. But I would leave it open as a possibility as well, given that the United States, as it stands right now, have, with its actions in Venezuela, and I will also go as far as to say, even with its actions prior to Venezuela, with respect to the Middle East, in many ways have undermined international law. And in many ways, I think, have impeded the international legal framework that was established in post-World War II to avoid specifically what just took place in our Caribbean waters at the start of the new year. And I will end with that. I know I talk a lot, but
No, that first of all, before Peter comes in with a question to you, I just want to say, and other people have been messaging us to say, yeah, your delivery is coming across with such clarity and consistently that I think they feel that you have overcome totally your stuttering challenge. But yes, it came across crystal clear, to use a term used by one of our listeners. And I just want to thank you for that thorough, studied, and detailed analysis and account and your interpretation. We really appreciate you being on the program this morning. It's really worth it. Pigeon?
Just for clarification, Trump's threat to Iran of invasion if Iran kills any of the protesters. Mm-hmm. Is that part of his overall geopolitical strategy?
Yes, you are quite right, Mr. John. That is also part of Trump's overall geopolitical strategy, but it is one that is also in line with their, as the US likes to say, their most important ally, and that is Israel. It's also part of Israel's foreign policy as well. If I take you down memory lane once again, I'm sorry, but I like to.
No, it's all right. That's perfectly
I like to use the historical context here, because as the saying goes, history repeats itself. If we go down the memory lane, the current prime Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, he have made public pronouncements over the years, and it could go all the way back to 2003 and probably even before that, but I will go as far as 2003, where he had stated that Iran is a threat because it is building a nuclear bomb. And every time he says that, he keeps saying they are either months away or they are a year or 2 years away from building a nuclear bomb. And this has been going on for the past 20 or 30 years. But actually, in some reports, it showed that this has been going all the way back to 1994, 1995. Forgive me if the year might be a little bit off, but approximately 1994, 1995, he has been making these claims. But the reason why I said that the Trump's policy is in line also with Israel's foreign policy, it is because he made this pronouncement more clear in 2003, I think it was, when he addressed the U.S. Congress about Iran being a threat. Because what I'm going to say as well is that Iran is not just only Trump's policy alone. It was the U.S. policy from previous administration before. Because the Bush administration plan wasn't just to take out Iraq and Afghanistan. They wanted to also take out North Korea and Iran. They are known as what was called the axis of evil. There's a term that they use known as the axis of evil. So for your audience and so on, if they want to look it up, they can dive in a bit more deep about it. But these states were known as the axis of evil. So Iran was part of this axis of evil that the US wanted to tackle. So Trump is just mainly continuing what previous administrations' goals were, but also in line with Israel's foreign policy to tackle the Iranian regime as well. So part of it is oil, yes, but also part of it is regime change to also have a more suitable sitter in power that will, of course, be to the benefits of United States geopolitics within the region as well, along with Israel. But I want to point to the hypocrisy of the Trump administration, because he said if Iran kills any protester, that the United States will intervene. This statement, I think, came either before or after. Again, my timeline might be a little bit off, so I do apologize to the audience. I think this came, either before, during, or after, when an ICE agent killed a U.S. citizen. And by all accounts, based on the video that we have seen, the U.S. citizen reversed and her wheel was turned away from the agent, indicating that she was trying to flee the scene from it further escalating. But the agent killed her still. But what did Donald Trump did as U.S. president? He came out in support of the agent. And he claimed that how she, the driver, the U.S. citizen, was presented a threat. I think his attorney as well came out, made similar utterances in terms of the U.S. citizen. The lady was a threat. She was trying to use her vehicle as a weapon. But video evidence shows that that wasn't the case. The point in which I'm making, that there has been a documented report of ICE not only killing this citizen, but have killed other citizens as well. And these are people who are also protesting what ICE is doing in their cities. So I'm saying, is the pot calling the kettle black? Why is it then that you are telling Iran, if the regime kills a protester, you are going to intervene? But in the United States, you have people who are being killed innocently by ICE agents as well. So why don't you then intervene in your own state? You have those issues within the United States. And of course, they talk about Iran arresting protesters. But during both the Biden administration, which also continued under the Trump administration, when US citizens were protesting US support of Israel's military actions in Gaza, which by all experts, legal scholars, and scholars of genocide and scholars of Holocaust, as well as the United Nations as well, have all concluded what is happening is a genocide in Gaza. Many citizens were arrested for simply protesting their government support of Israel's foreign policy, Israel's military action in Gaza. So the point in what I'm saying is you are looking at another state, Iran, and claiming that you will take action if they arrest or kill any protesters. But that has been happening in the United States. But why hasn't any action taken in the United States? So in other words, I think what Trump needs to do is to first focus at home before he focus abroad and deal with the situation in the United States first before he intervene in the internal affairs, again, which will be in violation of Article 2.4 of the United Nations Charter in another state's internal affairs. But yes, of course, you are quite right. Also, in terms of Trump's broader geopolitical strategy is also the toppling of the Iranian regime as well. One of it is for regime change, and another is also for the oil. But it is also important to Israel's geopolitical strategy in the region as well.
Philbert, any other question? Well, again, Dr. Kwashi, that's really your analysis is very thorough, and we do appreciate that. And people are already asking questions. We hope you have enough time to interact with some of our listeners who would would want to do so.
Yes.
And
I have a few minutes. Sorry to interject. I have a few minutes, but that's fine. I will.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me ask people who are listening and who wish to interact with you, questions and so on. They could call us now, 457-9997. That is the WhatsApp number as well as the straight line number if you wish to interact with Dr. Kwashi. But in the meantime, a question from here, Dr. Kwashi, and there are some WhatsApp messages, questions I want to pose. In terms of the governments in our region, where do they stand in terms of can they? Well, we have a call, so let's go right to the call. I'll take this call.
Okay.
Greetings, welcome to the program.
Hey, welcome, my brother. This is Dennis Phil talking.
All right.
I want to ask.
Razor, step in, Razor. Step in, is that you?
Is it that
Step in.
I don't remember nothing with
you're not hearing me anyway.
Oh. You know that before America do this guy in Venezuela that you know that they changed regime in Iran and Afghanistan and all these places. So why he not say America, international people? He talk about it, people that come in United Nations and thing, and they figure that is wrong. So if it's like you talk like if America now start to change people, America changes regime people all the time. He knock out with this fella right in America the two this dog man I think they change but America for some changing regime all over the world from long before Trump. So I find that was a little it should have really tell me that.
Well, step in. Can you hear?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Maybe you were not listening from the beginning of the presentation by Dr. Kwashi. He certainly covered all those things. All right. Well, Dr.
I
Kwashi,
didn't
you want to
listen from the
respond to
beginning.
him?
Mr. Kwashi, sorry about that.
Hmm.
Sorry about that.
Dr. Kwashi.
Oh, yeah, man. It's
I know I listen when I hear
No,
talk
no,
about
you don't do that. You have to listen to the
international
entire
people.
presentation. But go ahead, Dr. Kwashi.
Yes.
yes. Sorry about that. Yes. So to the person who called in, as Cecil was saying, I had covered extensively quite a lot of what the caller had said. So the caller is right in pointing out that regime change by the United States is not a new phenomenon. So he is right, but it's something that I had also touched on in my opening statements. But as he said, he didn't listen from the start, so that's probably why he didn't hear.
Yeah.
So that's probably why he didn't heard me when I talk about Grenada and I talk about Guatemala, etc., and I talk about Iraq, Afghanistan, just to name a few, etc., and so
Yes.
on.
All
But
right,
I
we have
want to touch
another
on.
call. We have another
Oh,
call.
sorry. Okay, we have another one. Yeah.
Greetings, Bongo Chaka.
Yeah, greetings, brother Cecil and Pigeon, and foremost, Professor Dr. Kwashi. Give thanks for having you here and all the listeners. Bongo Shaka here. Dr. Kwashi, before I go into one thing, is that you keep mentioning about the immigration problem, right?
Yes. Mm.
But I think even before this escalation invasion by Trump, there was an immigration situation, or you may say the problem. Even
right.
across the Colombian borders, you have at least about 2 to 3 million people over there, and other areas also. So I think the immigration problem is already there, but I think it will get more worse or escalate if things don't come to a fruition that situation adjusts itself in Venezuela. Right? So that's just a comment on that. But foremost, Dr. Kwashi, I haven't heard you mention break it down running into with bricks, right? But I'm looking at you remember as a man who was attending these things. Remember in 1974, right? When you had the agreement with the American at the time, I think with Henry Kissinger, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That they work out, right, with the payment of the oil, they call it petrodollar, to be paid in the US currency, right? This was about the whole petroleum system, and which kept the American dominant in the economic powers throughout the world by the control of oil, wealth, and so forth. So at that time, you had these other situation developing, and then you remember when they launched the embargo against Venezuela somewhere in 2018. You had Venezuela, right? They were accepting at the time, they started accepting the yuan, which is Chinese money, the euros, rupees, and so forth, like, in their money. And then they were petitioned to join BRICS at the time. But they were veto. I think I'm subject to correction, Doc, but I think it's Chile that veto that situation whereby they couldn't join BRICS. They had a confront there, and I think they're the one who opposed it, if I'm correct. So by they making that payment, they were bypassing the system where they call SWIFT, SWFT,
Yes.
something like that. Right. So at that time, 20% of the whole oil were right there in Venezuela, which it had billions of barrels in oil, which about 20% of the whole oil that is in. So I'm looking at that. So that's a part, and you rightfully said about China. So the involvement of China, Russia, the big money of that and so forth, and the dollar, and with BRICS, because once Venezuela joined the BRICS, which BRICS, control, BRICS countries control about 49% or so of, or more. Some analysts will give you a bit more of the world GDP.
Yes.
Right. So that it's a tickle situation, about the dominant of Venezuela and controlling the oil and so on. So the whole heap of thing, and you expand a lot on some of the situation there. So the global South knows what is happening. It jumps it, boy. If you threaten our dollar, hegemony,
Right.
the only solution is, boy, we invade you, we put sanction against you,
That is it.
But
Yes.
that's what I ask myself. What is give America these so-called powers to just wheel as in like because they feel they mighty? Dictate and tell you must friend with, you must friend with Joel, you must be friend with Cecil, you must be friend, and all these things and
Right.
try to dictate he is Trump is a sick man, eh?
Hold on, Dr. Shaka. You've made so many comments and you've asked a very specific question to Dr. Kwashi. Let him respond and then you can hold on.
Yeah, I'm going to say one last thing that is about China. The statement Donald Trump made, right? About China. And he said, he telling them, well, boy, Yuan Ping Wing, whatever his name, he has his eye on Taiwan. So let it go ahead, So he ain't showing no cancer right now. He wants to choke Taiwan under the bus like he did the opposition in Venezuela there. Also in the Iran situation too. You see what he's saying, that if Pijan brought in the Iran situation, that I observe is a mental psychological thing with Trump, right? Here we do.
Right.
Hold on, Dr. Shaka, I have to interrupt. You are going on from one thing to the next without any. Let's deal with one that. Hello. I want to deal with one. I want Dr. Kwashi to respond to one item at a time. All right. So, Dr. Kwashi, can you respond to him? He asked a very specific question about what gives the United States the right to do these things. You want to respond to that?
Yes. Okay. So, because there was a number of good and solid points that the caller made as well, and I really appreciate it.
He's still on the line, Dr. Kwashi. He's
still on the line. Yes.
Yeah, so you can
where he talked about the petrodollar agreement as well, and that would have been around the 1971 to 1974, around the same time with the oil crisis as well, if memory serves me right. And the whole idea of the petrodollar agreement was for OPEC states at that time, OPEC, to also sell oil using the US currency, and that would have strengthened the dollar, making it sort of the global currency of the oil. Just to put it into context as well here, because prior to the petrodollar, we also had the gold standard, and then this is where the dollar was also pegged to the gold, and this was during I think during the Bretton Woods monetary system, to which you had, and which created, of course, two major U.S. financial institutions, which is the International Monetary Fund and also the World Bank. But before that, it was also known as the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. But the US dollar under the Bretton Woods system, and this was because of, I think, what was his name again? Harry White. And this was versus the UK counterpart, John Maynard Keynes. But what White got was the dollar, US dollar, being pegged to the gold. So it was 35 US dollar per ounce of gold. And that what that did is that it strengthened the US dollar, making it the major currency for trade and for international commerce. But after the Bretton Woods system collapsed in the 1970s during the Richard Nixon administration, which was also during the oil crisis as well. They then went to the OPEC state and then made this agreement to ensure that the US dollar is the major global currency as well. So when we buy oil, you have to buy oil using the US dollar and so on. That is just to sort of simplify it for the wider audience to understand what really the petrodollar, to what the erudite caller had mentioned and so on. So I really appreciate that analysis as well, and also that inclusion. So you're quite right. Part of it is also the US dollar as well, the US currency being the major and global currency as well. And once it is pegged to oil, it will maintain the dominant currency of the world. And just to answer quickly the question that Mr. Ryan, Dr. Ryan, had pointed to. I'm not sure if I have the correct title here, so sorry. I apologize.
No, it's all right. It's okay.
And so on. To come back to the question that the caller also mentioned, what gives United States the right? Right. So I like how you phrase the question, because again, the United States, based on how the international order is set up and based on international law, particularly post the 1648 Treaty of Westphalia. And the reason why I mentioned that, I must invoke that because it was after that the whole idea of sovereign states came into being, the idea of sovereignty. Let me put it that way. I don't want to misinterpret it. But since the 1648 Treaty of Westphalia, the whole idea of sovereignty came into existence. What this means is that states, again, have as a sovereign entity, as a sovereign actor, have the right to decide their own domestic and foreign policy. Again, which is enshrined also in the 1933 Montevideo Convention on the Rights and Duties of a State. So I just want to put out first the history and the international legal framework to also highlight that Trump doesn't have a right to determine what a sovereign state can and cannot do or say. But of course, he acts as if he has that right. And the only reason why it is because the United States is what scholars of IR will call a hegemonic power. And because it's a hegemonic power, which is a superpower, it can exert that right to tell state what they can and cannot do. So I like the way you phrased the question, but I also wanted to answer it in terms of the international legal framework, in terms of the historical context of it, but also the contemporary one, which of course will be the 1933 Montevideo Convention on the rights and duties of a state. So Trump shouldn't be telling Venezuela who they can and cannot engage in, which is why I also took a more cautious tone in encouraging not just only our government, but also other governments of the Caribbean as well, as it relates to our relationship with China, or those who have no relationship with China, but might be planning on doing so as well. That we also have to be practical and cautious in our foreign policy approach. I know it is wrong. I don't like encouraging states, sovereign states, to make foreign policy decision based on what another state foreign policy agenda is, and it shouldn't be, because that is not how the world supposed to be. But as realist scholars such as John Mayer Scheimer and Stephen Walt and Kenneth Walls will tell you, the most important actors in international relations are state actors, and particularly hegemonic powers, because they are the main decision makers. It's the same thing they did in terms of the International Monetary Fund when Venezuela wanted to access about $5 billion in loans from IMF. They refused, and they refused him because the United States did not recognize his government, even though the people had elected him. They did not recognize his government at the time. But the International Monetary Fund is an institution of the United States, and the United States exalts its hegemonic powers through these institutions as well, such as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, which is why they are also able to implement economic sanctions on states. And just one point, just to end off, if you listen to Secretary of State Marco Rubio to address what the caller also talk about in terms of BRICS, because he mentioned BRICS as well, which is an important point. I didn't really mention BRICS because I was focusing mainly on the Trump Venezuela, its action, and drawing sort of historical parallels and what this may mean for the Caribbean region. But the BRICS is also important to mention, given that they account for approximately 40% of the global GDP, I think, as a collective state, as a collection of states. As a collection of states, and so on. It is because, again, Marco Rubio, who is the Secretary of State, he mentioned Brazil in terms of them bypassing U.S. sanctions, etc., and so on, so on. If states start to trade in what? Their own currency. So this is where BRICS come in as well. So this is a concern for the United States. If the BRICS member states start to engage in trade and international commerce in their own currency, given that as a collection of states, they make up a very massive percentage of the global economy, it will undermine the United States' ability to coerce those states into taking actions that the United States may not agree with. So this is why Marco Rubio also made that mention. I think he made it in an interview when he was addressing the media, etc., and so on, about that being a concern as well. Them trading in their own currency. So the currency part is also an issue for the United States because, again, they would not be able to implement economic sanctions on states that they deem actions are not in line with U.S. foreign policy or U.S. geopolitical strategy.
All right, Bongo Shaka, we have to move on. Other people are trying to get on. All right? Thanks for calling.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
Anytime.
All right. So the phone lines have been ringing. While we're waiting another call, well, there's one here now. Mm-hmm. Greetings, Kojo. Kojo.
Good morning. I don't know if the brother is still there, but I
yes, he's still there.
I have to tell him that he's the biggest example of a village raising a child. I like how he had to give credit to all those people who helped him along the way. And I mean, in truth and fact, if everybody look into their life like how he did, they realize that it took a whole village to bring them to the point that they are. And I like that part. I mean, you know, I don't want to go into the war business and all that stuff, but that part it touched me a lot this morning when I hear him giving those credits to his three mothers he called us. And I mean, we all have our 3, 4, 5 mothers, you know. That sometimes we don't even remember them. But that stuck with me. I like that. I really love that. And I'm glad you bring it out because I know I have to reflect on how many mothers I have in my life. You know?
All right,
like
Kojo.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for calling.
Can I take just one more call and then I have to prepare to leave? I really do apologize.
Okay, but let me. There's a question that I want you to respond to.
Yes.
You may have done so before, but this person is saying, well, actually, it's from our colleague Joel. He's saying, what are the implications for international law?
Oh yes. Okay.
And also, he said international law, as well as institutions such as the United Nations.
Yes, okay. Tell Joel thanks for that question as well. And Mr. Brian, you also is quite right. I had, in fact, addressed it as well, many of it. But just for a summary, to answer the question, what Joel posed, because it was more specific. Even though I did touch on international national law, the question is a bit more specific in terms of where do we go from here in that regard. So the way how I look at it, because I also teach international law as well. It was one of the courses that I taught last academic year, I believe it was, because I teach a variety of courses in international law. And one of them I also teach now is international organizations as well. And one of the organizations I teach is the United Nations, to which Joel is asking me about as well. So a very good question there. So what I will say is that what Trump's actions in Venezuela has done, I believe it has in fact imperiled the international legal order. And I say this to say that what will happen going forward is that many powerful states, not so much the small states, the weaker states like Caribbean states, Latin American states, and states in Southeast Asia or in Africa, etc., and so on, you know, like the weaker states and so forth, who don't have that sort of military and hard power to do whatever they want. What will happen is that the more powerful states will simply ignore international law, or most of international law. The use of international law was also part of United States soft power, because as a hegemon, they have two powers. One, soft power, and hard power. When you read writings from John Ruggie, who is also an international relations scholar and one of the persons who coined the term soft power as well. For those who want deeper reading, they can look up John Ruggie and also Robert Keohane. Just to name a few scholars' name that they can look at. So international law was part of the United States soft power. So what will happen is not only that international law itself has been imperiled, but also the United States will not be able now to use it as part of their soft power anymore. And let me give an example here. If you look at even with Iran, to what Mr. John had asked me earlier, if Iran is part of Trump's geopolitical strategy as well. Just listen to the statements from the administration and administrations before him. When they talk about Iran, they talk about it within the context of international law. They talk about it in terms of protecting human rights, the respect for the rule of law, etc., and so on, all of which are part of international law. Because international law is vast, which covers not only use of force, but it also covers title to territory. It also, and title to territory here will also be relevant as well. It also covers things such as occupation. Occupation will also be relevant within the US-Venezuela context as well. Because if the United States the United States invasion is being followed by the United States government taking control of Venezuela, it is in fact an occupation, and that should be understood within the context of international law, particularly the Hague Regulations of 1899, the four Geneva Convention of 1949. Specifically, they all deal with occupation, etc., and so on. And international law, like everything else, has evolved over time. And what I mean is that what occupation used to be understood as was when a state physically occupies another state. But occupation can now also include not just a state physical having boots on the ground within that state's territory, but also can occupy through other technological means, and so on. Like what the United States has been doing with Venezuela by blocking certain ships, oil ships that Venezuela have been sending to Cuba and even China or even Russia. There was a ship that they recently took over. I think that was either heading to Russia or so on, right? So within that sense, in international law, you will have an impediment of it. You will have a breaking down of it, a disruption of it, and probably states will ignore international law in its vast variety, not just in terms of use of force, which is enshrined in the United Nations Charter, but other laws, such as laws of the sea, in terms of how we operate within the ocean and the sort of engagements as it relates to international law and the sea as well, respecting not just only land sovereignty in terms of land borders, but also the sovereignty in terms of the ocean, particularly the 12 nautical miles that surround a sovereign state, which is part of the sovereignty of a state. And of course, you have the 180 miles, which totals up to 200 nautical miles. And the 180 miles, I think, is about 80 miles or so, which is then used for exploration and exploitation, etc., and all of that. I say all of this to say because all of this comes into play. The freedom of navigation as well also comes into play in terms of in terms of international law. So all of these legal instruments, of course, will be in trouble. And so this is a major cause for concern as well. In terms of international institutions now that are tasked with also the governance and the enforcement of many of these different international law, particularly the International Court of Justice, which is one of the 6 organs of the United Nations that deals with disputes between states. How would that play out within the Venezuela and US situation? would the ICJ, even though the ICJ will have jurisdiction to deal with the matter, the question is, would the United States subject itself to an ICJ court case?
Just pause a minute. Just pause a
Yes,
minute.
sorry.
I recently heard that the United States has, in fact, withdrawn from
Yes,
the
yes.
6 organizations. So that demonstrate their attitude towards international bodies and institutions.
Yes. So what they have done, they have actually withdrawn from not the United Nations itself, but from a lot of the bodies. I think about 66, if memory serves me right.
Yes.
About that, bodies, organizations that are part of the United Nations system. Because what it is that while the United Nations have 6 main organs, it also includes committees and bodies and other organizations that it has under its belt. So what the Trump administration has done is not to withdraw from the UN itself, but to withdraw from a large portion of the United Nations organization. I think approximately 66 of them, if memory serves me right, and so on. So yes, so Mr. John, you are also right to also invoke that as sort of an example, an empirical evidence, if I may, to sort of substantiate the argument or the point that it is less likely that the Trump administration will subject the United States to ICJ hearing or dispute on the matter if Venezuela is to take the United States to the International Court of Justice for its illegal invasion. Currently, it's taken over of Venezuela's oil, etc., and so on. So they are less likely to do that. So you are right. International law, however, may still apply to smaller and weaker states. But then again, it's based on U.S. action. I think you may have a domino effect, a spillover, if I may, where other even weaker states might also say, well, you know what? I am allies with the United States. America is our close ally. And if they are ignoring international law, we can also ignore international law. But weaker states who are friends with the United States or who the United States like may more likely follow that trend. Weaker states who are not so close with the United States may not be allowed to follow that trend in terms of ignoring international law, because of course the United States will invoke its big stick policy, talk soft but then use the military when it's ready and so on. But I also wanted to add one last point. Oh, sorry. Yes.
No, I wanted to say that I don't know how many more minutes you can afford. But,
yes. Oh, yes. So the time is going.
But just to say that a number of people are calling in, including Dr. Richard Byron Cox. I know he's been trying to get in.
Yes.
And I don't know if you have time to respond to all of that. But in the meantime, let me just say a few WhatsApp responses. Somebody saying, excellent intervention. Who is the person? I guess he was listening from the beginning. And then this person saying, somebody who works here at WEFM on another program, weekly program, saying that the person wanted to find out your views on the question of Dominica, Antigua and Barbuda, and St. Kitts and Nevis, the latest situation with them, and in terms of being pressured into accepting refugee deportees.
Oh, okay, refugee. I didn't touch much on it. But...
Right, but she's asking for a comment from you on that. And while you're doing that, let me also say that one Huggins. You might know him. Do you know him? He was
Fitz
also on our
Huggins, yes.
program. Yes, he asked
Yes.
to give you a shout up.
Oh,
And,
yes. Give him a shout, please.
and wish you the very best in terms
Thank
of
you.
your own continuing development. Yes, I just
Thank
wanted to say that on behalf of Fitz. But yes, I don't know how much time
I have
you...
to run because I
Yes.
think I have like a minute left, but I have to run. I
Okay.
really do apologize, but I can do a follow-up next time if
Yes.
possible. Yes.
Well, I'm glad
yes,
you're making that offer because I was about to kind of get a response from you in that respect.
Yes.
So yes, because this program today has been very rich in information delivery, and the level at which you have gone to explain these things,
Thank
people
you.
are very impressed, especially coming from your own the information you gave earlier. We are very impressed on the program, and I know Dr. Cox is trying to get in, but
Okay, tell Dr. Cox I said hi.
Yes,
you
I'll
could
tell
let
him.
him in. I could stay really quick.
All
I
right,
could
let
stay
me
to
bring
quick,
him
and then
in
I could.
then.
Yes.
Dr. Cox, I just forced you in. Because Dr. Cox, morning. Yeah, good afternoon.
It's afternoon time, Mr. Ryan.
Oh, you see, we've been having so much delight with this program this morning, so you understand. Yes, as you're following on, as you heard Dr. Kwashi said to he wants to interact with you. I don't know how much time he has, but go ahead.
Yeah, because I have to run quickly, but I wanted to give him a shout out. Yes.
Yes, Dr. Kwashi, I want to do two things. Firstly, to thank you for offering your expertise to our country, to our people, to our nation, and explaining these things to people. I think that is really, really important. And secondly, for being an active citizen. I believe in active citizenship, and we taking playing our role. So I really want to thank you. I want to thank Cecil and P. John bringing you on the program so that you can share expertise with our country, because with them, you might not have been able to do it. So I really want to. Now, firstly, I think we are both on the same page in terms of the legality of this. To be more correct, the illegality of this as regards international law. There's no question about that in my mind. What I would like to engage you with are three things. Firstly, what about international morality? This is the question here, because as you know, morality is the judgment of good and bad, not necessarily right and wrong, but good and bad. That's what morality really is. And in my mind, it is a flagrant destruction of international morality, not just law, but morality. In other words, there's no understanding of good and bad between the United States. There's just the understanding of our power. That's it.
That's right.
And in a situation like that, countries from Jamaica, where you lecture, I think, to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we will suffer because there's no understanding of what is good and bad in international relations. It's just an issue of power. So it's not just a question of illegality, it's a question of immorality, international immorality. That is me.
Dr. Cox, in kind of sympathy for Dr. Kwashi, can we have both of you on next week to continue?
Well, I am available to you.
All right, so let's agree on that, because
what is Dr. Kwashi's disposition, but I will be available.
No, but he has already indicated that he's going to come back.
Yes,
because in our sympathy for him, I mean, we have gone already beyond the time that he's allocated.
Yes,
so we want to allow him to go and to come back and raise your three issues next week for sure. But I just
all right.
You can
Dr.
continue.
Kwashi, it would be an honor to be with you. It would be an honor to be with you.
Yes.
It would be
I
really
just wanted
great honor to be with you.
I just wanted to mention that I'm not sure if I might be available next week because I am also preparing to travel for a little bit for research and also school.
Okay.
I'm preparing for school at the same time, which opens next week as well. So I am prepping for that, but I'm also prepping for a travel soon to conduct some research. So I'm not sure if I might be available next week. So I really do apologize about that. But I will try
No,
my
it's all right.
best.
You just let me know
I will
which
indicate.
way you are,
Yes.
and the
But-
information will not be too late. And I'm sure even if
Yes.
Dr. Cox is on country right now, is in country right now, but even if he
Okay.
goes back, we can do it the way we're doing with you.
Yes,
That's not a
but I
problem.
would like to hear what Cox said real quick. If Dr. Cox
Okay,
can
fine.
just
Okay, fine.
really
What-
quickly
what,
say
Dr.
his
Cox?
three things,
Right. So,
but then say it quickly.
yes, the
Try and
three
make it as
points
fast
which
as
I
possible.
wrote then,
Yes.
yes,
So you-
I admitted rapid, right? But there are 3
Okay,
points
yes.
which I think your expertise are important to us. Firstly, as I said, international morality, good and bad, right? Not right or wrong, but good and bad. Secondly, there's this idea in some people's head that once the American Congress approves something, the president can do what he wants in the international arena. This is nonsense. There
Right.
is an American Congress, but it's only a Congress for America. It is not the world
Right, that's
Congress.
right.
And people
That is
need
right.
to understand that. So that people say, oh, he didn't get authorization from the Congress. Whether the Congress authorized it or not, it is not international law. It is only a
that's right.
Congress of the United States of America. That's the second point I would like to hear us discuss. The third point I'd like to hear us discuss, because I think you would agree that it is absolutely necessary. I think you pointed it out many times this morning, but not in detail. I think we should discuss it. That this has further consequences. For example, if Donald Trump decides that the agricultural produce of St. Vincent for this year belongs to America, and he's going to come and
That's
seize
right.
it, what do we do?
That's
What
right.
do we do? But
That's
outside of that, Doctor, you and I would agree that the fact is that America sees the Caribbean as a dumping ground. So whatever criminals they don't want and whatever criminals they don't like, they would send it to us. And if we don't agree, we just have to accept it. So I think
That's
these are
right.
broader issues which we need to discuss. And I think your expertise, you and I together, could share that to our country and the people of the Caribbean. So those are the 3 things that I thought
Yes.
I wanted to talk to you about. But I understand you have to go. So as Mr.
Yes,
Ryan
yes,
said,
yes. So I will
we can
just-
meet together, whenever.
Yes, I will just respond real quickly as well to some of the stuff that you mentioned. The 3 points that you mentioned: international morality, the U.S. Congress, and also if Trump's what was the last point again? If Trump's decide to simply take over, let's say,
That the
the
product
agriculture.
yes,
Yes,
that
right.
doesn't take
So
them.
what I want,
That's what
yes.
he's done with Venezuela. What stops him from doing it with St. Vincent?
That is right. So what I wanted to mention first on the international morality within the context of international law, because international morality as well is also important, even when you look at it within the context of international national law, particularly when you're looking at the nature and scope of international law, going all the way back to Hugo Grotius. Scholars and writers like them, etc., and so on. Right, where you talk about the morality of international law, speeding all the way up to contemporary treaties on law, particularly human rights treaties on law, like the international law that deals with the elimination of racial discrimination, or the international law that deals with against torture or the rights of a child, or even the CCPR, which deals with civil and political rights. Those were actually brewed or born out of the idea of international morality and then enshrined in international law, making it not just only a moral obligation of states, but also a legal one as well. So this is where the symbiosis between both international morality and international law meets. So I just wanted to also mention that as well. And then to your point with also the U.S. Congress as well, you are quite right. The U.S. Congress is for the United States. However, there is just a point I wanted to make in terms of international law, particularly the right to self-defense, which is Article 51. Now, if the United States was attacked by an armed attack, let's say another state had attacked the United States, right? Say, for instance, Venezuela had actually launched, just for argument's sake, let's say the state of Venezuela had launched an attack on the United States, an armed attack. Then the United States has the right under Article 51 to respond to this attack because it will have the right to self-defense. But this is where the U.S. Congress will come in, which will be operating outside the United States in the sense of, because of the separation of powers in the United States, which is the judicial, legislative, and executive branch are separated. Even though the United States has been attacked, the president, which occupies the executive branch, he can respond to that armed attack. But in order to fully declare war within the legal sense, he has to go through Congress, which occupies the legislative branch. It's the whole idea, the concept of the separation of power in the United States. So yes, the U.S. Congress deals with United States. But if I'm just being a little bit critical here in terms of looking at it in terms of an armed attack, in terms of how Congress can operate within this international space, is that they will approve the war powers for the president to actually engage in a war in response to this armed attack that the United States had just suffered by another state. But again, as you and I agree, this does not apply within the context of Venezuela at all. And then the last point in terms of the agriculture too, which is a really good point as well, and you are so right. If the United States, and even Trump actually said that he doesn't respect international law. He listens to his own morality. So you are right to actually bring those 3 points as well. But in the latter point now, in terms of the agriculture, you're right. If Donald Trump decides to say, okay, we're going to take the agricultural produce because we think this is part of U.S. national security interest, we can go back in history to answer this. Why the United States had overthrew the Guatemalan president, they overthrew him, which I mentioned earlier. Part of the reason why they got rid of that democratically elected president in 1954 under the CIA Operation PB Success was because of what? It was because of United States Fruit Company. United Fruit Company had an interest there, and they went to Washington, and Washington then decided, okay, our corporations are going to lose land and revenue, so therefore let we concoct issue a threat so that we can go in, etc. and so on. So if we are to use history to answer this, we can then see where the U.S. might do the same, let's say in the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. If a U.S. agricultural firm realized that, okay, our arable lands is important to them to grow their crop, all they have to do is generate a threat by saying, okay, well, the new government, I think that they seem to be harboring drug traffickers or facilitating drug traffickers, and they are leaning more towards a communist lens, and etc. and so on. And that's how they will use that justification to sell it to the American public that it is in your national security interest. But the main goal is to take over our arable lands for that agricultural firm, just like they did in Guatemala, to take over. It's the same thing with the banana wars. The whole issue behind the banana wars was because U.S. firms in Latin America, particularly
Exactly.
banana and all. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And
Yeah.
that is
No,
what
no, I
the banana was. So I think we can
yeah.
use historical events to answer some of those issues as well. But Dr. Cox, I really
Yeah.
appreciate you raising those points as well. And I
No,
hope that
it would be an
my
honor to have an exchange with you. It would be
yes,
an honor.
yes. So we can have it. Yes, sir.
It would be an honor.
And I just want to say thanks to everyone and thanks to the audience, and I really appreciate many of the commentaries in terms of my life and also some of the responses I give. So I want to say thanks to the audience as well for your comments and for your wishes and appreciation and so on. And I want to thank Mr. Brian and Mr. John for having me on such an erudite and intellectually rich in program as well. And my friend, oh my God, and my friend Damien Marte. I think me calling him doctor is a sign for him to pursue his master's and then PhD.
I like it.
Right? So I just want to say thank you all, and I had a great time, and it was a pleasure. If Mr. Ryan or Mr. John want to say anything before I go, I'm gonna let you guys have the floor now. Yeah.
I quickly want to just share my warmth about the reference to the Monroe Doctrine.
Yes.
And the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. I used to teach history.
Oh,
and
nice.
Look at the blank faces of those students when they mention those doctrines. And I'm thinking now that perhaps they're listening and realizing how much of a relevance it was then as it is now. So I just want to mention that, and thank you very much.
Yes.
For your contribution today.
And Dr. Kwashi, it has been an enriching experience interacting and listening to you in your presentation. Very thorough, very knowledgeable, very detailed. And it reminds me of Dr. Cox himself when he comes on. That's what he does. So I just want to say thank you. And we certainly look forward to the time when both of you can be available to our discussion on issue at hand. We thank you very much, and we want to wish you all the best going forward. By the way, your books, are they available on Amazon?
Yes. They are available on Amazon. Both of them.
Can you quickly repeat the titles so our listeners can?
Yes. So the first one is Stakeholders of Terrorism and the Caribbean, and that is published by Palgrave Macmillan. The second one is The War on Terror and the Caribbean, Smithian Perspective. That's the latter part of the title there. And that is published by Routledge. Both of them you can also find on Amazon. I can also send you the message as well, Mr. Ryan, the links and so on, so you can get in WhatsApp. Yes.
Well, again, thank you immensely for being on our program today, and we look forward to having you again sometime shortly.
Thank you. Yes, and it will be my pleasure.
Okay. Because there's still questions coming in, but we can't detain you anymore.
But we can, yes, I know. I'm sorry.
That's
all right.
All right, then. Thank you very much. Bye.
Anytime.
Okay. Yes, but Philbert, that was a good one.
It's a good one. And again, I have to express regret that I didn't pursue international relations as a discipline, as a course of study. But what we've had over the past 2 weeks, last week and this week, gives us an idea as to how important the subject is of international relations and the use of power as it relates to small island states and the big hegemonic states that we confront.
And we are fortunate to have to kind of take us into those discussions to well respected and knowledgeable Vincentian intellectuals in Dr. Cox and Dr. Kwashi, and of course we also have Professor Justin Robinson, who incidentally had reached out to, but the only reason he's not on the program today is because he's traveling. But he's, well, as usual, he is offered to be on anytime in the future when he's available. So that's another option for us. So, but in the meantime, yes, we've benefited immensely from the discussion led by Dr. Cox, by Dr. Richard Byron Cox, and now Dr. Emmanuel Kwashi. And there's a particular sympathy for both individuals, given their own history in terms of their development, academic and health, and their allegiance to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And we really appreciate them. I want to wish them all the best. So we would make an arrangement to our listeners, we'd make an arrangement to have both of them on sometime. But in the meantime, we have to live with the consequences and implications of Donald Trump's and his government's action in terms of Venezuela. But we are also reminded that there was a time when one name. Well, first of all, I want to play two clips. I want to play a clip by Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, I think his name is, from the US about Trump. But I also want to play one that, and I hope CP doesn't mind us using his calypso to remind our listeners of what he himself sang about. Was it 1985, I think? And has kind of updated a little bit. So I'll play first one, the clip from Congresswoman, and then I will play the CP Hall calypso. So let's hear them.
That are talking about this is good for the Venezuelan people because Maduro was a bad guy, but that's not why he did it. He has not cared about Venezuelans at all. Let me be clear about that part.
That's true.
And here's the receipts. The Enemy Aliens Act, which most of us had never heard of because it's from the 1700s, he invoked it specifically because of Venezuelans. He said, we are being attacked and invaded by Venezuelans. That was number one. Then the next thing that you know, CCOT, that's where he was sending Venezuelans. Remember the 60-minute episode that they did not want to air about how they were treating them, mistreating them at CCOT? That's where he sent Venezuelans. Then after that, he was illegally killing folk, saying that, oh, well, they're bringing drugs because it was supposedly about fentanyl, which is not where we get fentanyl,
No, it isn't.
to be clear. So then he killed over 100 people with these bombs that he was dropping. And then when he went in to get Maduro, he killed even more Venezuelans. This ain't about Venezuelans. I get that there are people that don't like the leader. But guess what? There are a lot of people that don't like our leader. And regardless, somebody coming into the United States and grabbing our leader in the middle of the night and killing people in this country, I'm sure everybody would be outraged at them doing it that way.
Yeah.
So this is CP, and I hope he doesn't mind it. This is his updated version of his Calypso Crown winning tune from 1985. He calls it the Caribbean.
As it was yesterday, dignify the Caribbean. Hear me now. The eyes of the world, they focus on the Caribbean. We can't get a chance to plan our own destiny. They fighting with one another now for this region. For many, many years, they're trying to control we. But tell them they better change up their master plan. You hear me? We don't want another recolonization. Oh no. As a Caribbean man, I'm singing it loud and clear. We don't want another Iraq down here. The Caribbean. We live in peace and tranquility. The Caribbean. This region stands for democracy. The Caribbean. The superpowers must understand. The Caribbean. This region is not a battleground. Come, let's unite as one. Let's strengthen integration. Work as one to dignify the Caribbean. Oh, yeah. A message to our leaders. Be strong. Be courageous. No time for weaklings. These are trying times in the region. Listen to the message. We leaders fighting for power in the Caribbean. It look like they lost their pride and their dignity. So sad. Instead of trying to eliminate starvation, look, they're choosing to dip their hand in public money. I want them to sit down and discuss CARICOM. Oh yes. A blind man could see long time now there's something wrong. Real wrong. Mr. Caribbean man, be loyal to your country. Fight against the US hegemony. The Caribbean. I want we leaders to understand. The Caribbean. We can't live in peace with guns and bombs. We must work to boost the economy. And get rid of crime and poverty. So come, let's unite as one. Let's strengthen integration. Work as one to dignify the Caribbean. Written in 1985. Relevant today as it was yesterday. The Caribbean region, our home, a zone of peace. Let it remain a zone of peace. Come again. I wonder why all my friends leaving the Caribbean. They're going to live their life in the USA. They call it migration. Some say they can't stand the poverty in the region. They're working for next nothing, so they run away. But tell them they're running and roaming everywhere. Eventually they have to come right back here. Oh yeah, Mr. Caribbean man, be loyal to your country. Remember the pledge you made to society. The Caribbean. This place is a paradise. The Caribbean. Oh, the rain and the sunshine nice. The Caribbean. We must live in love and walk hand in hand. The Caribbean. Respect yourself and your fellow man. So come, let's unite as one. Let's strengthen integration. Work as one to dignify the Caribbean. The Caribbean. We must send a message to Donald Trump. The Caribbean. This region is not a garbage dump. The Caribbean. From Antigua right down to Trinidad. The Caribbean. The Caribbean's nobody damn backyard. So come, let's unite as one. Let's strengthen integration. Work as one to dignify the Caribbean.
Well, Pigeon, well put, well said, well updated by CP Hall, and timely. It's amazing when we heard that in 1985, when you became the Calypso King. Then we didn't think of this situation today, and it's happening. He suddenly predicted, and in the song, it's happening. But
well, one question we haven't focused on much is what can the Caribbean do as we move forward?
Actually, I have it written down. Was supposed to Dr. Kwashi. From the point of I was trying to put it from the point of view of two levels: one, the government, and also civil society. Because I think what we have done and what we have been doing on ECUTAN and WEFM is really trying to tackle it from civil society, in giving a voice, giving a medium for people to respond. And so they're having people like Dr. Cochran, Dr. Kwashi has been really doing that. But the governments, I don't know. I would like to know whether, I think there are some small things, soft things they can do, but it'd be up to them to figure it out.
And more than any time before, the need for Caribbean unity, genuine Caribbean unity.
It's
And
never
I think
like
this
now.
right now, I don't think we're reflecting that. We seem to be divided on the
unfortunately.
issue.
Well, we would have a chance to talk about that again when we bring back on our two colleagues and brothers. In the meantime, we want to thank all those who listen to the program, the community of WFM listeners and ECUTAN listeners. As I said earlier on at the beginning of the program, it's a family affairs, according to what's his name now, Sly and the Family Stones. So we thank you for being with us today, and we look forward to being with you another ECUTAN program next Sunday. My name is Cecil Ryan on behalf of Philbert and Karen. Good afternoon.